no promises of heaven and no threat of hell, would you still worship that God?
I'm going to answer that with a resounding no. There is absolutely no way that people would still worship this deity if there was no promise of heaven and no threat of hell. You see, that fear of hell is what keeps these people in worshiping of this God, and that promise of heaven in order to avoid that hell is what keeps people from worshiping this God. You see, if you just took the promise of heaven and the fate of hell out of this Bible, then look purely at how this Bible depicts this deity, then no one would ever worship this deity. You would never worship a deity that promotes genocide, that promotes slavery. You would never worship a deity that tells you to slaughter so many animals so that it can smell that sweet aroma to his nostrils. You would never worship a deity that tells you to rip a bird almost in half and then burn its flesh. You would never worship a deity that goes into Egypt claiming to be freeing his people, and in doing so hardens the heart, takes away the free will of the Pharaoh to ensure that he can inflict the death of the firstborn, the flies and the locusts, the boils, the hailstorm, turning all the waters into blood. You would not worship a deity who would be so cruel to people who had never heard of him. You would not worship a deity that has subjugated women to the point where their only value is that to have babies and to be married off for dowries. That women cannot own property nor receive inheritance. You would not worship a deity that would destroy Sodom and Gomorrah and all the people within it simply because they do not worship this deity. You would leave that deity alone. You would not worship this deity. You would not worship a deity that tells slaves to be good to their masters, whether the master is good or bad. This is a deity you would not worship. Nor would you worship one that says that God has approved whatever government you find yourself under. You wouldn't worship that deity either. There is no point in people worshiping a deity that requires for you to find your salvation that a human, i.e. Jesus, have to go through human sacrifice, blood sacrifice, in order for you to find salvation and find the goodness within you. This is not a deity that people would worship if there was no fear of going to hell imposed upon their life. So it's a good question, and find Lex's page because she has a great page and she brings forth a lot of great information. But the answer is a resounding no if a Christian can wrap their mind around it well enough to say that if this heaven and hell was out of the picture, that they would still view this God as a good God, a loving God, because a God that describes himself as being angry, as being jealous, as being envious, they would find this to be a very cruel God, a God that says that I will send you into slavery for generations because of the sins of your father. You would not find this to be a good God. You would not find it to be a benevolent God. And you would then look at that God as a childish, narcissistic egomaniac, to which it is, as he is described in this book. But always remember, you have to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.